Jeff Cooper on rifles. That's what we're going to talk about today on Gunfighter Life. Welcome to the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, ballistics the right way, with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world, first-hand experience. I am blessed to be your host. If this is your first rodeo here, check out bio in the show notes as to why you should listen to anything I have to say. But today's not really about my bio. Let's talk about Jeff Cooper, or Colonel Jeff Cooper. I may not always refer to him as Colonel Jeff Cooper. I mean no disrespect. I don't ask you guys to call me Sergeant Melito or Officer Melito. Sometimes I may call him Colonel Cooper, Jeff Cooper. You probably know of Colonel Cooper. Even if the name sounds vaguely familiar, you're probably familiar with his work. And this is not all inclusive here, but greatest hits such as the firearm safety rules and the color codes of awareness and Gunsight. So you're probably, again, even if you're not primarily familiar with him, you are probably familiar with his work, whether you know it or not. He is one of the major influencers in the 20th century. I recently got a book for my birthday. My wife got me the present of Jeff Cooper, To Ride, Shoot Straight, and Speak the Truth. The things we'll do sometimes when we have time is go to the library together. She had seen me reading this book at some point, and she bought me a copy. I was perusing it, drawing in it with pencil, getting some of the key things I wanted to talk about. This book encompasses more than just rifle stuff. However, today I'm going to drill down on Jeff Cooper on rifles. This book, keep in mind, copyright 1988. And that was when it was copyrighted. Likely he formulated these ideas and stuff, obviously, sometime prior to that. How much prior, I don't know. But just keep that in mind as we read along here. Now, this is under the heading in the book, The General Purpose Rifle. So put that on the back burner in your brain, the General Purpose Rifle. One of the first quotes I highlighted, little of importance has been done to improve the rifles with which we greeted the turn of the century. He's talking about the last century, mind you. Consider that. And we have had some advancements that I wouldn't call Cerakote like a giant leap forward. There have, the concept of the assault rifle came into its own. But if we talk about bolt actions, right, so my favorite go-to bolt action is still variants of a pre-64 Winchester Model 70, which is a variant of the 1903 Springfield, which is a variant of the late 1800s Mauser. Direct lineage there, and the basic design is pretty similar. This one slapped me in the face when I read it, and keep in mind, this is 88. We have dwelt too heavily on cartridge variation, forgetting that all modern cartridges will do very well if they are shot well. I'm going to read that again with all the stuff going on with cartridges. We have dwelt too heavily on cartridge variation, forgetting that all modern cartridges will do very well if they are shot well. Whew. You heard it from Jeff Cooper. This also I thought very pertinent and it rang very true for me. And I perused this book in the library quite a while ago. I don't know if I had read much of this before, or if I had, I don't remember. But today it seems like we're spoiled. A lot of people that are into guns have a gun for this and a gun for that. This is my deer gun. This is my elk gun. This is my whitetail gun. This is my mule deer gun. This is my pronghorn gun. This is my AR. This is my battle rifle. This is my urban counter sniper on Wednesday rifle. This one's that same rifle in multicam, so I don't get made fun of at the range because I'm wearing last year's camo. Now, enter the quote. It is much easier to specialize than to generalize, and the definition of a general purpose rifle is a complex task. Let us attempt it by declaring that a general purpose rifle is a conveniently portable, individually operated firearm capable of striking a single decisive blow on a live target of up to 200 kilos. I think if my math is correct, it'd be like 440 pounds. Using the old brain calculator. Kilos in weight at any distance at which the operator can shoot with the precision necessary to place a shot in a vital area of the target. Going ahead, he says, power is important. Practical accuracy, as opposed to intrinsic accuracy, is important. Okay, this is me stepping in here. And I was pontificating this very thing today when I was on a ruck. I was listening to people talk about these hot new cartridges shooting out at 1,000 yards. And really, in the modern rifle world today, I think of it in two big categories. Let's and I might rename this or something. This is working titles, but athletic rifles and morbidly obese rifles. Obese rifles and in-shape rifles. In-shape athletic rifles are those that are handy, easy to carry, easy to shoot dynamically, standing, sitting, kneeling, prone, urban prone. He says here, conveniently portable. These other obese guns are the big, fat, heavy, obese things with big, fat, heavy, obese scopes that end up weighing, 10, 11, 12 pounds or more. You're talking some of these disciplines, 18 pounds, 20-something pounds. What are we doing? It's like, I'm not saying they're not rifles. It's like a sumo wrestler is an athlete. And to be fair, that's a highly specialized thing. I don't think I would do very well going toe-to-toe playing by the rules in a sumo wrestling match. But a sumo wrestler, as much talent as they may have, is not a general purpose fighter. What would you rather rely on? A sumo wrestler or an MMA fighter? An MMA fighter beating like a general purpose rifle with several different disciplines. Going back to his initial quote, it is much easier to specialize than to generalize. Today, they're pushing these very specialized, fat, obese. Ooh, it's got a high BC. Ooh, I can shoot 1,000 yards. Ooh, it weighs 20 pounds and has a giant fat scope on it. I basically have to shoot on my belly or on a tripod. That is a niche gun. And if you have that very specific niche, or you just want to fill that niche, go ahead. But that's not a general purpose rifle. That shouldn't be a go-to unless you're going to that niche. Continuing on, he says, convenience is important. Power is important. Practical accuracy as opposed to intrinsic accuracy is important. Alright, now he starts talking about scout rifle. It's still under the general purpose rifle. If you don't know, Jeff Cooper was kind of like, I think he got this from somebody that has something to do with maybe the Boer Wars in Africa, or one of the African scouts, maybe Rhodesia, looking at the timeline. I could be wrong about that. But I don't know if he borrowed the concept of the scout rifle, but he definitely made it part of the American gun culture vernacular and kind of refined and modernized the concept. So Jeff Cooper could be called like the daddy of the scout rifle. He starts talking about the scout rifle, and he talks about the famous old Mannlicher 6.5 carbine was a step in this direction, as was the equally famous Winchester Model 94 30-30 carbine. Both those rifles, I would agree, and they're both good rifles, especially for their time, for the 1800s, late 1800s. In fact, I was just going through a book. It's called My Life with the Eskimo, Stephenson. He went to contact these uncontacted, still living the old wild ways in the early 1900s, Eskimos. And he killed all kinds of stuff with his Mannlicher Schoenhauer 6.5. Talking like all kinds of caribou, bear, just all kinds of stuff. with that 6.5 Mannlicher. And that was a 6.5 by 50 something, and maybe a 6.5 by 54. Anyway, it's a good general purpose rifle, and just this is way down a rabbit hole, but may I say one of the most exquisitely beautiful rifles ever made. I thought this was something new. I remember this coming about in like the early 2000s when I started getting into like the longer range shooting stuff, and then realized that what am I doing here? This is a little bit ridiculous. And then it kind of went away, and then it's come on hard in the last several years. Kind of like version 2.0. It seems like we have to learn these lessons every so often. This is Jeff Cooper on the big giant telescopic sights. In recent decades, progress in the development of telescopic sights has been to a certain extent negative, in that telescopes, instead of becoming stronger, smaller, and faster to use, have become larger, more cumbersome, more fragile, and almost necessarily mounted too high above the bore. A man after my own heart. Again, don't get mad at me. You heard it from Colonel Cooper. It's so delicious. I'm going to read that again. The development of telescope sights has been to a certain extent negative, in that telescopes, instead of becoming stronger, smaller, and faster to use, have become larger, more cumbersome, more fragile, and almost necessarily mounted too high above the bore. This is me interjecting, used to be the standard was a 1-inch tube, a 1-inch tube, 1-inch tube. Now it's hard to even find, unless you just want a 3-9, which I still think is too big. It's hard to even find a lot of these good scopes in a 1-inch tube. A lot of these LPVOs, people are like, why don't you get a 1-6, why don't you get a 1-8, why don't you get a 1-10? You can do it all. Yeah, at the cost of being fat and obese again, at the cost of setting a sumo wrestler on top of your gun. A lot of those have 30 something, 34 millimeter tubes. I would rather have the well balanced, sleek, svelte nature of a 1-inch tube. Continuing on, this is going back to the book. There are those who think that a glass of low power is necessarily less precise for long range precision work, but we have not found this to be the case in any sort of realistic test. Let me read that again. There are those who think that a glass of low power is necessarily less precise for long-range precision work, but we have not found this to be the case in any sort of realistic test. Oh, and this, how long have I been telling you guys iron sight? If it's a go-to like survival rifle, iron sights, iron sights, iron sights. This is what he says about iron sights under a subheading, metallic sights. Reserve iron sights are held to be desirable for a proper scout rifle. Let's continue, shall we? Heavy barrels, so popular on target guns, have no place on a general purpose rifle. Let me read that again. The heavy barrels, so popular on target guns, have no place on a general purpose rifle. This is desirable on the range, but not in the field. And the natural habitat of the scout rifle is the field rather than the bench. This is more specific to bolt actions, but he says two-lug 90-degree rotation was favored, as was the traditional Mauser claw extractor and positive ejection. Smoothness and reliability were found wanting in most modern commercial actions. Again, I'm a big fan, and I have been for a while, of the pre-64 Winchester, you might say Mauser, kind of the same thing, type action. Controlled round feed, giant, massive claw extractor. Let's see about triggers. The trigger system should be smooth and clean and provide a 3-pound glass rod release. That's a good That's pretty good. Three pounds on a good general purpose rifle. Yeah, I'm about it. That's a good weight. This one, I want you to chew on it. Now this, I come from an infantry background, right? Primary MOS in the Marine Corps, infantry, primary MOS in the Army, infantry. I'm an old school infantryman, but I want you to pontificate on this. In battles between opposing forces of infantry, the need for continuity of fire in order to suppress the enemy and gain what is known as fire superiority over him is quite evident. Whether a man alone may ever have any such need is not so evident. I think there's a time and a place for a battle rifle. That time and place would be on a battlefield. And, the subtitle of the podcast is Survival Guns. Gunfighter Life Survival Guns. But I think too many people, when they think survival scenario, they go to Red Dawn. I'm not saying something like that could never happen. I've been to war in my lifetime. Empires collapse, people invade, things happen. But is that the most realistic? Is that the only rifle that you have as a battle rifle, or is that the only thing you train on? Because I've been to war, and I think there's a time and a place for those rifles. But is that the only scenario or the most likely scenario or the attributes that you should be looking for in a rifle? That is something you should pontificate and think about on your own. He also continues on to say, what I am driving at is that in nearly all individual situations, the rifleman is going to need range, power, control, and ease of movement more than volume of fire. I'm not going to completely discount volume of fire. That can be a thing. However, there is a saying, and it's real popular in competition circles, you can't miss fast enough to win. If you pull the trigger a ton and miss a ton, that's rarely useful. Another guy could just decide, I'm going to take my ball and go home. But if you go back to the Rifleman's Creed, right? What you learn in Marine Corps boot camp. If you've never read the Rifleman's Creed, you should probably look into that. Maybe I should do an episode on it. But in the Rifleman's Creed, it says, it's not the noise. It's the hits that count. It's the hits that count. You've got a guy trying to kill you. Would you rather, and this is not me anti-high capacity magazines. I'm very much not. But would you rather miss the guy 30 times or hit once? Just going back to the book. In high school ROTC, I was shown the offhand kneeling, sitting, and prone positions. I learned these positions well enough to make the rifle team. When upon graduation, I went after my first big game in Alberta. I took 4 prime trophies with 4 shots. This is not meant as a boast, but only as evidence that Uncle Sam really did have the answer. Now, I didn't know this till I didn't read this when I was going through highlighting. I was just going back to see if I missed anything. I also used to compete in high school in a 4-position rifle. Standing, sitting, kneeling, and prone. If you only ever shoot your rifle, this is me interjecting here, if you only ever shoot your rifle off a bench, or only ever shoot it on your belly, how practical is that? Are you hauling a bench with you on the side of a mountain? Are you hauling a bench with you on a battlefield? A bench for zeroing. Standing, sitting, kneeling, prone for your practice. Most of the time. There is a time to practice on a rest or on a sandbag or something. I'll concede that. But standing, sitting, kneeling, prone. I want to close with this on quoting from the book for now. There is nothing wrong with gimmickry as long as we recognize it for what it is, but we should not be deceived into thinking that more is necessarily better, nor that newer is necessarily nicer. The simple principles of smokeless powder cartridges for sporting arms were well understood by Teddy Roosevelt and some of his contemporaries. We are a nation of gadgeters, and it is quite understandable that we should believe the science must bring us newer and more marvelous gadgets with every passing year. It is well to remember, however, if we consider our guns judiciously, that it ain't necessarily so. The words of Jeff Cooper in To Ride, Shoot Straight, and Speak the Truth. Now, certainly I would not agree with Jeff Cooper on everything. I don't agree with everybody on anything except for Jesus Christ, because everybody else is wrong, including me. We're all wrong. But I see a lot of similarity there. I think sometimes I feel like I'm the only one when all these influencers and all these YouTubers are getting kickbacks and pushbacks by Chinese companies and big optics companies and this and that to push all this new stuff. And again, if you realize it's gimmickry and gadgetry and you just want to buy it and you have the disposable income and you're not going into debt, that's fine. But don't make the mistake of thinking that it's necessarily better. Anyway, that was a little bit from that book. I appreciate you guys for listening and have a blessed day.